most cases, a lot of these organizations are trying to be agnostic of the environment. So system design is kind of a necessary skill set going forward. So having said that, let's dive into a simple system design question and see how you are going to tackle building it from scratch and have an idea what the framework and the infrastructure looks like end to end. So in this context, let me tackle this first question as system design for a leading retail client. That's the context. So we got the context right. And now we're going to jump into design a system where the input signals are coming as clickstream data from a source called, let's say, Adobe Analytics or Google Analytics GA4, Google Analytics GA4, the latest and greatest from Google. Connect the data to AWS S3 storage. Then transform the data in Microsoft or Azure Databricks. And finally, visualize the trends in the clickstream data in Tableau. This is a real-time use case. I've actually got this question in one of my recent interviews. So how will you go about solving this question? So we have three major components, which is the clickstream data. It's coming from a source. You can connect that using an API, most likely if it's a batch process. So some of the clarifying questions, I'm going to come to that. Connecting the clickstream data to AWS S3. That's the high-level design. And then you are going to transform data using Azure Databricks. It could be because of data governance aspects, security and compliance. And then you're eventually going to visualize the data and share it with your stakeholders using this data visualization platform, right? Platform. I'm going to label this. This is how I'm going to put together the thoughts, right? This is the high-level system design architecture, high-level system design guidelines, I'm going to say, because it's pretty much like a guidelines. Now, I do have some clarifying questions. So go over those clarifying questions very clearly. One is, go back in here. Is it purely structured, in other words, tabular data? That's an important assumption, because if you're designing for anything that is related to unstructured data, you might want separate design altogether, because you want to be cognizant of the time, you want to be cognizant of the cost involved. So I would definitely try and ask that question to be clear with your interviewer. So that's an important question to start with. Then you want to ask questions about, is it your first part of the system design is AWS S3, is loading ELT the idea behind the design? So you're going to extract, load in pockets as in batch process, and then transform, because that's what the design looks like. You are loading into S3 bucket first, and then you're going to transform from, if you want to talk about at a much deeper level, the bronze, silver, and gold layers of Azure Databricks. That's like having data at a very raw format, in a very raw formats, like, for example, Parquet or JSON, and then you're enhancing that data into much more structured format, which is the silver layer, and then a production-ready tables with indexing and column level and row level security. That's going to be the gold level data, which you can actually publish and start sharing with your stakeholders in the form of Tableau visualization charts or bar graphs, however you want to showcase it. So that's the design you want to talk about. So is ELT the major system design format? So that's what it looks like to me. So you're going to check on that. That's a necessary assumption to make. And then I want to talk about, do I need to be cognizant of cost optimization and logging the data timelines. Most likely that's going to be the case, and you want to talk more about it. How are you going to use time travel and Unity catalog within Databricks? That is going to be an important aspect. The more you ask these questions, you're going to have a better understanding of how you want to go forward with the system design, right? So let's try and see if this is going to give us any visual picture that you can demonstrate during your interview. That's why I love to have Napkin.ai come into play while trying to explain any of your data design or product design in this context. So I'm going to select one of this formats so I'm able to explain better to my interviewer. So I think I like this. Yep, I'm going to select that. And then I'm going to fix on a template. Okay, that's my initial design where I'm going to, or initial design guidelines, I'm going to show my interviewer. And then these clarifying questions are important. So we don't probably not need any visualization for this. So we got 3 good questions to go after. And then the 4th question, the last one, would be something around why be agnostic of environment. This is more about the product knowledge. Can we leverage Salesforce? Because at some point, that could be one of the sources. That could be a way to optimize the cost, because Salesforce owns Tableau for native integration, etc., instead of AWS. Okay, can that be one of the sources? So that's more about the product knowledge you're going to talk about. This is understanding of data structures or type of data. This one is talking more about what is the process of data maturity and life cycle that you want to think about while designing the system. And the next one, how are you going to leverage some of these services? What kind of services do you really need? So Unity catalog, data lineage, bronze, silver, gold transformation layers. So these are some aspects that you want to talk about while you're designing your Databricks transformation piece. So just definitely go about that. And I think we can add one more question: data visualization. What are the implications? Data visualization constraints. Who? How many stakeholders? How many stakeholders need to process data hourly basis, hourly, daily, or weekly? That's going to give an idea about how fast you want the architecture to work. If the architecture needs to be very, very nimble, maybe even worry about generating the data and uploading it hourly, then most likely your stakeholders want to have no lags in generating the visualization, right? In that context, you might want to create views versus actual production tables. So you're keeping in mind how frequently the data is being retrieved and how frequently you're going to upload the charts. So these are the high level aspects. So I'm going to say, try and create a visual now that's going to pretty much talk about understanding the processing. It's a much more complex ecosystem you're going to talk about. So I do love these charts. Let's see if it has a much better way to talk about. um, okay, I do like this. I'm going to keep this in place. So you're talking about AWS S3 bucket, and you want to think about cost logging and data timelines. So that's going to govern your system design about what kind of services you're going to leverage. You're going to use AWS Glue to get the data on board into the S3 buckets. And then from the S3 buckets, you want to leverage step functions and Lambda functions, which are pretty much can be integrated into any 2 systems out there. So Lambda function is probably what you want to use to get your data on board and connect it to Azure Databricks, where I believe data governance, privacy, and security could be the major aspects that you want to focus on. And then you're creating kind of row level and column level security, which Databricks enables. And then from going forward with the transformation process, you are creating bronze, silver, and gold layers where you can always revert back if your data is not as efficient or as ready as your team wants it to be. And if you're also involved in data visualizations, you get a better sense of if it is ready or not. Once it is production ready, when reaching the gold layer in your system design within the Azure Databricks, you are ready for data visualization, which is in Tableau, and you have connectors that you want to connect. After you build the production database, kind of maybe want to involve your data engineering team there, and also want to design and understand about what kind of tables that need to fuel your data visualization dashboard, because depending on the number of stakeholders, depending on how frequent you want to refresh your dashboards, you want to understand the design inside of Tableau as well. So the multiple aspects, the design inside S3 and how you want to create your plugins and connectors, the design and transformation within Azure Databricks, and finally within Tableau. And I would also pop a question about maybe we can leverage a source like Salesforce, because it has much faster integration available, native integration, because Tableau and Salesforce are one and the same at this point. Okay, that's all for today. I hope this makes a lot of sense. And I would highly recommend Napkin.ai as your go-to product for tackling any client presentations or even interviews. System design, I think it is groundbreaking. So let's catch up soon with more interesting system design questions.